the International Human Rights Day, that is today. After 16 days of activism of gender-based violence, today is the day those 16 days of activism also end, and today's International Human Rights Day, whether it be across the world in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir or here in Pakistan and across the world. Human rights are of paramount importance, and laws have been passed in Pakistan as well as in other countries to combat those violations. More in the following report.
Absolute rights that everyone is entitled to as human being, regardless of race, color, religion, gender, language, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth or other status. Human Rights Day is observed every year on 10th December, the day the United Nations General Assembly adopted in 1948 the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is a milestone document of the time. This year, Human Rights Day theme is equality. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. The principle of equality and non-discrimination are the heart of human rights. This includes addressing and finding solution of deep-rooted form of discrimination that have affected the most vulnerable people in the society, including women and girls, indigenous people, people of African descent, migrants, and the people with disabilities, among others. The Human Rights Charter of the world may be mentioned as a modern version of the farewell sermon of Holy Prophet, peace be upon him. First ever Charter of Human Rights, which has been given by Rahmatul lil Alameen 1400 years ago, is comprehensive course of social life. Humanity is a core whether we talk about international standards or religious one. As it is well said by Nelson Mandela, to deny people their human rights is to challenge their very humanity.
Humanity is extremely important, and to understand human values is even more paramount across the world in Pakistan. And that is why laws have been passed in Pakistan to oversee all the violations of human rights. To talk about the International Human Rights Day, the human rights violations, how we are combating it in Pakistan, we've been joined by Rabiya Javeri Agha. She is the chairperson of the National Commission for Human Rights. Ma'am, thank you very much to have joined us. First of all, would you like to highlight what your commission has been doing as far as the human rights are concerned in Pakistan? Ma'am, can you hear us? Also, there seems to be some kind of a technical issue, and till that is resolved, let's just give you a little outlook on what the International Human Rights Day entails. As has been shown in the report, it is in 1948 through a resolution on this very day that the International Human Rights International Human Rights Day is celebrated across the world. This is to ascertain and to control all the violations that happen, whether it be gender-based, whether it be towards children, whether it be towards communities, whether it be towards entire nations. Human rights are something that needs to be undertaken with utmost importance from the different organizations such as the United Nations that has been doing that through its different resolutions across the decades, or whether it be by individual countries across the world, whether it be in the West or in the East. Pakistan, for that matter, has also passed several laws as far as human rights are concerned, as far as the giving rights to the women and gender-based violence is concerned. There have been laws that have been passed by the government of Pakistan. Rabiya Javeri Agha, chairperson of the National Commission of Human Rights, joins us again. Thank you very much, Ma'am Agha, to have joined us. Let's begin with your commission, ma'am. How do you feel your commission has been working as far as the human rights and preserving the human rights in Pakistan is concerned?
Thank you very much, Omar. Nice of you to call me and to acknowledge the importance of Universal Human Rights Day, and to acknowledge the importance of the strong role that we have to play both in the government, in civil society, and in the media to actually push the message across that human rights is not something that should be neglected or ignored, but something that should be protected and saved. Before I talk to you about the commission, I think the message that has to go is that human rights is something we are born with. It is something that is inalienable. It is part of our existence. It is part of our definition of being a human being. And those rights are not given by anybody. They are validated by the state and you have legal cover in the constitution and domestic law, but your right is your inherent right as a human being. So nobody can give you those rights and nobody can actually take away those rights. The machinery in Pakistan for human rights, as you call it, the human right ecosystem, consists of a federal ministry of human rights in the federation, provincial human rights departments in the provinces. They represent the state, the policies of the government, the direction that the government wants to take with regard to human rights policies. There is also entities in the government in Pakistan known as commissions. Commissions are independent entities. They are sort of the apex of civil society. They get their mandate and their reason for existence, as they've arisen there, from the public, from the people. They are the head of what would be known as civil society organizations. Now, the National Commission of Human Rights, which I just recently took over, all of literally 1 week ago, the 3rd of December, the day of that very tragic lynching, the commission had so far been dysfunctional for the last 3 years. So it's now just getting it back into motion, activating it. There are 3 arms to the commission. One is legislative, one is judicial. Sorry, that means we, as chairman of the commission, I and my members have judicial powers as of a civil court. So if we find that something has been done wrong, if people come to us with complaints, we can actually report statements, call for evidence, get information, documentation as a civil court. So that is our role in terms of redressing problems. So we have lots of people who come to us, there are literally thousands, who come to say that they are facing various issues. And if we can resolve them at our level, we do, or we then refer them to the relevant court. The second thing the commission does, it's kind of a watchdog to government policies and legislation. So say we see something that the government is doing and we want to support it, or we say that this particular legislation of yours needs to have this looked at. So we advise the government on legislations they do, policies they may do, or gaps they may have. And we also submit independent reports to the government on where they should move if they to enhance or improve the human rights situation of the country. So it's an executive role, it's in a judicial role.
All right, ma'am, now let's talk about human rights in Pakistan. I read the message of Ma'am Shiri Mazari as far as today's importance is concerned, and she talks about the different laws that have been recently also passed by the parliament. That includes the Protection of Journalists and Media Professionals Act that has now been made into law, also the protection of women's law, also the different shelters that have been put into place for the children and for the transgenders as well. Do you feel that the government is doing enough as far as protecting our communities are concerned?
Well, I'll tell you something. In terms of legislation, Pakistan is one of the most strongly legislated countries in the world. Our transgender bill is actually par excellence, and that's one of our flagship bills. It actually was done during my time, and Senator Rabiya Khalid moved it. And it is one of the most humane bills in the world. Because other bills, when someone says that I have a gender issue, they are subjected to very, very humiliating medical, psychological examinations. India has such a very strict law, and that's very dehumanizing. And in Pakistan, we have what is known as self-determination of gender, which is a very, very a very sort of humane way of looking at people who are facing gender identity crisis. Pakistan has got some great stories to tell in terms of its legislation. During my time when I was Federal Secretary, Ministry of Human Rights, we also passed Juvenile Justice Act, which talked about how you don't send children to prisons, but you then use a word which is known as diversion. So juvenile delinquents can go and do social service. They live separate. They're not. They have a right to bail immediately. They can go to hostels, but they do not have to live in. They can divert their sentence through social work. So that's a very innovative law. The issue and the women's laws are very empowering. And as you rightly mentioned, Pakistan has a series, and all the provinces have a series of protocols for women. So you have helplines. 1099 was the helpline that we set up at the shelter. You have crisis centers. You have protection homes. You have shelters which actually women can live in. One of the best shelters is the Islamabad Women and Family Protection Center. So there's all the ducks are in place, as they say. The issue happens and two things affect us. One is when you have the law and people don't know that law. If you're very quick in making laws, you have to ensure that those laws and information of those laws are disseminated to the lowest level. So sometimes we may have a brilliant law, say,
But if the
on
people
child
are not
protection,
cognizant of
but
that
the
law, then
people
how
in the
can that
lowest
law be used by those people?
Exactly. That's the point. So how do you disseminate? इतने जल्दी हम कानून बनाते जा रहे हैं. How do we let everybody know that there's a new law coming into place? There's a law that says bonded labor is bad. How do we disseminate that information? So इसमें obviously the media has a very strong role. Also, there's a lot of sensitization. Again, you people have a strong role. Training of law enforcement agencies, training of the judiciary, training of the prosecution to test the systems that are in place.
All right. Ma'am, Agha, COVID-19 as a pandemic has also really exacerbated the human rights values of a lot of people in different communities across the world, including Pakistan. What needs to be done in order for the different genders, whether it be women or children or certain sects of the society that have to bear the brunt of violence, to make them understand that there are laws for them, and how to reassure them that the government is there for them. There are different NGOs also that are there for them. How can we reach those people?
Well, I was part of a report we did on COVID and human rights, and we took 8 areas of concern that the UN Secretary General had talked about with regard to COVID. So women, children, prisons, detention centers, education, the economic impact. There is obviously COVID has really impacted. The biggest impact that we've seen is that you have serious issues of domestic violence. Violence has gone up exponentially in Corona because the woman is got no refuge. The man is frustrated at the house. He can't earn. He's a daily wage earner. And so there is the woman in the house. She may be a victim of that violence. She doesn't know how to escape, and she is at home with her perpetrator. So we saw extreme rise of domestic and child abuse, what we did at the Ministry of Human Rights when I was there, we put in a secret code. We made an app for telephone users that could just press a button and call for help. In Australia, they have a very interesting thing. Canada, sorry. If you are subject to domestic violence and you can't talk on the phone, and your husband or whoever is beating you is there, you simply say, "I want a pizza." You phone up this number and you say, "I want a pizza delivered to this address," and that number knows that it's not really a pizza. You need help. So that's how they did it in Canada. We did it through a button. that you could, a helpline button that you press on the,
Of course, I think,
mobile
but you
app.
know, again, ma'am, Agha, with the due apologies, we need to make all of these laws, all of these methodologies that have been put into place by organizations such as yours or the government. I mean, the reach needs to come to that common man or woman in the little village in Sindh or in Balochistan or in Punjab, so that he or she knows his or her rights and what he or she can do in case something happens to her or him.
You're absolutely right, Omar. The thing is, how do you do it? Advertising is so expensive. Print electronic media is not accessible to everybody. This is where there has to be CSOs. Every company should have. Now, when you go to when we go to big corporations and say, "Can you do a message for us?" They say, "हम तो already अपना CSR कर रहे हैं, अब हमारे पास और पैसे नहीं हैं." I think this is something that I don't know. It maybe should be made mandatory. I know in Cambodia they had a very high rate of child trafficking. And they literally made it mandatory that every single workplace, at the back of every rickshaw, everywhere, they had posters on saying, "Stop child trafficking." So I don't know, maybe we need a very concerted thing. And this, I guess, is when media, corporations, civil society can help.
All right, ma'am, final question to you. If we go a little bit beyond Pakistan, we have all the human rights abuses that are happening in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, also what happened to the Rohingya Muslims, also what is happening in Palestine. So many forms of very severe and blatant human rights violations. Whose responsibility is it? Where does this onus of responsibility come to as far as controlling what these different countries are doing as far as perpetrating the human rights abuses are concerned?
Well, yes. You see, all over the world, we are seeing a big growth of right-wing policies, and in that, a very the world after the World War realized that we had to live together. And I think those lessons that the World War taught have been forgotten. And now there is extreme, people have become very jingoistic, very nationalistic. The atrocities to Kashmir have been highlighted time and again. Article 370 of the Constitution that was revoked. You look at, you mentioned Palestine. You look all over the world. There's a growth. There's a growth of Islamophobia in Europe. There's restrictions on how you dress. As Muslims, women are not allowed to wear hijabs in many countries. So that's their right to determine how they want to dress or to pray or where they want to pray. So I think this is a growth of what is known as a sort of very exclusive way of thinking, what the World War taught us.
There is a very barbaric way of thinking as well, ma'am. And I really hope that on this day, the realization comes to those organizations that can wield that pressure and power on those countries that are involved in such barbaric human rights violations, that they need to stop or else put some kind of sanctions on such countries and the cities that are involved in it, so that the world can be a safer place to live in for the women, for the children, for the men who are being subjugated to this violence. And as far as Pakistan is concerned, thank you so very much, ma'am, to have highlighted us all with all of the work that you have done yourself during your tenure, and which is continued to be done by the current Ministry of Human Rights as well under ma'am Shiri Mazari. Thank you very much, ma'am Rabiya Javeri, Agha Sahiba, to have joined us and to have talked to us about this very important day, that is the International Day of Human Rights.